The Rockets had the worst record in the league and the second worst net rating. Yeah, it was a rough season for the fans from Space City, but hope is on the horizon. There's beginning to become a bit of a consensus at the top of the draft, and the Rockets' draft position means that they'll definitely have one of the quote-unquote top 3 available to them. So, who are they likely to select? Well, that depends on who's available, and at this point, that's anyone's guess. Plus, they could decide to take a swing on someone else. That's why I'm going to break down 4 possible selections they could make with both of their picks and how they'd fit in this Rockets team. So, without any further dilly-dallying, let's get into it. Let's start things off with Jabari Smith out of Auburn. Jabari probably has the highest floor in the draft. There's a good chance he ends up being something close to a 6'10 Klay Thompson. I know, that's high praise, but it's not quite off the table. Jabari's stroke was exceptionally pure, and I'm convinced it will translate. He shot jumpers from all over the court and from all sorts of situations. Catch and shoot, pull-ups, step backs, turnarounds, you name it, he did it. He has the ability to just rise up above guys and nail shots right in their face. The Rockets were already in the top 5 for 3-pointers attempted, but were in the bottom third for efficiency. Jabari would definitely help with that. Defensively, he is a monster on the perimeter. He's long, with good technique and an insane motor. He loves to battle with guys and gets nice and low, which is a great sign for a guy as tall as he is. This should really help the Rockets' frontline defense, which really lacks good defensive personnel right now. He's also an exceptional athlete and should be a great player in transition. Now for the negatives. He wasn't a good finisher at the rim. He struggled to create shots for himself reliably, although I think there is potential there. He wasn't a high-level passer, and he lacked the rim protection potential to justify being a team's primary rim protector. That means you end up with more of a complementary player, which isn't a bad thing if they're as good as Jabari is. With that being said though, he's around 6 months younger than Paolo and about a full year younger than Chet, and considering the improvements he made at Auburn, I wouldn't rule out another big jump from him. Next up, let's talk about Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga. I've said this twice on the channel already, but I feel compelled to say it every time I talk about Chet. I think Chet is the highest floor raiser in the draft. Nope, not the highest floor in the draft, but the highest floor raiser. What do I mean by that? Well, I think if everyone reaches their realistic potential, I think Chet improves a bad team the most. He has the potential to become a defensive anchor who can command the paint and protect the rim with the best of them, and then stretch the floor and playmake out of the short roll. From the top of the key on the offensive end. That's a really solid building block for a very good team. The potential for Chet to, despite his frame, provide a presence on the interior and defense should have the Rockets intrigued. The 5-out lineups they could construct with Chet would also allow Jalen Green to thrive even more. I don't think he has the best player on a championship roster potential though. The things that hold Chet back are his frame, his switchability and effectiveness as a perimeter defender, and finally his scoring. The frame just is what it is. I'm not gonna really dwell on that for too long. In terms of switchability, I think he wasn't terrible, and his length actually helped him recover from certain situations. I just wonder if he can still do that at the NBA level, because he did get beat off the bounce a lot of the time, and it's not like the Rockets, at least for now, have the personnel to make up for that. In terms of his scoring, I think he'll hit threes and finish stuff created for him around the rim. Other than that, I'm not sure about how he gets his buckets. There are concerns out there that teams can switch smaller guys onto him and live like that. I think that becomes less of an option if the jumper is money, as he can just shoot right over guys. However, that would mean he becomes more jumper dependent, which increases the variance in his output. He doesn't really have a post game, and I don't see him taking many guys on off the dribble, especially in playoff scenarios. I still think the Rockets will be looking for a big in this draft, and I'll go deeper into my reasoning for that later. But if that is the case, Chet's probably the best one out there. Moving on, let's talk about Paolo Banchero out of Duke. Every time I talk about Paolo, I mention that I feel he has the highest offensive ceiling in the draft for me. The shot making ability, the playmaking, the offensive versatility, the depth of his bag, it all has me really interested. He was able to be the best player on the court on the offensive end and have that kind of impact without necessarily being that heliocentric. This gives me hope that he can coexist with the likes of Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., and even Alperen Şengün in the frontcourt. His jumper could use some work, and he's not as athletic as Jabari, who we spoke about earlier. With that being said though, the efficiency wasn't bad at Duke, and for his height and weight, he's certainly not a bad athlete either. Defensively, he wasn't always at his best, but I think there's some real potential there. I truly believe that if the right people get their hands on him, he could be a solid defender. I do wonder if the Rockets' current setup are those people though. A part of the appeal with him is that he can play the 5 in crunch time, but I do worry about his shorter arms and general lack of rim protection in those scenarios. If he can make it work though, they could run some 5-out spread pick and roll with him and Jalen Green, which has the potential to be absolutely unstoppable. Lastly, with the third pick, let's talk about Shaedon Sharpe. Sharpe is an electric athlete. He's got some truly jaw-dropping burst and explosion at the rim. He makes it look so effortless when he gets into the restricted area. He's a pretty good finisher at the rim in general, and his length helps him in this regard too. Sharpe is a big-time scorer and has some serious shot creation upside. His jumper should be pure both from inside and outside the arc, and that combined with his ability at the rim should be a foundation for a high-level scorer. His vertical athleticism doesn't really translate to a great deal of explosion off the dribble, and he's definitely more of a slow, methodical dribbler than a freight train like Jaden Ivey. There is potential though there, and I wouldn't rule out growth in this aspect of his game. The passing also wasn't a major negative, but it wasn't really a real positive either. I'm not sure he can ever be the focal point of an offense, despite him having the ability to be a team's best scorer. Also, for all his athleticism at the rim, he didn't really show great lateral quickness on the perimeter, and that was in high school games. His length and verticality are good tools for him to have, and project him as at least a decent help and recovery defender, but he's still got a lot of work to do on that end. Ultimately, I don't think the Rockets will end up taking Sharpe, but I think he might be intriguing enough to have a chance of going here. Moving on, let's talk about guys they could potentially take with the 17th pick. Let's start with Mark Williams out of Duke. The position I think the Rockets really need to address first is center. They were the worst rebounding team in the league and the worst defensive team in the league. A big part of that was the fact that they lacked a real presence on the interior. Christian Wood is a good player, and I love Alperen Şengün, but I feel like they're missing a particular profile of big. Plus, I think that there's potential for both of those guys to play the 4. Mark Williams should definitely help the Rockets with their rebounding and defensive issues. He's a good rebounder, and I'm in love with his defensive potential. I feel like he has the potential to become one of the upper tier defensive big men in the league, and considering the other personnel on this roster, I think he'll have to become that for the Rockets to see success in the future. I think he's reasonably versatile as a big, and his intelligence and savviness is up there with the best in this class. He's not necessarily a flashy pick, but I could definitely see him as a building block for the Rockets moving forward. Let's now talk about Usman Jiang from the New Zealand Breakers. The next position I think needs addressing is the wing position. And since I don't think there are any bigs we're taking here, my next 3 picks will be wings. Jiang had a rough start to season in the NBL, but he really came along later in the season. He's a very long wing who can provide a lot of versatility on the offensive end. He's a budding ball handler, and his pull-up game and scoring package from the mid-range is really intriguing. He's a very good passer on the move and will find guys when they're open. There is potential with his shot too. He's gonna need some time to develop, but if he does, he'll slot right into that small forward position for the Rockets. Let's move on to Tari Eason from LSU. He's a lengthy and athletic wing who could probably switch 2 through 4. He averaged a monstrous 7 stocks, that's steal plus blocks, per 100. He's great at anticipating and getting stuck into passing lanes, and his athleticism should offer the Rockets some additional rim protection, which would be welcomed. His impact should also be more immediate than Jiang's. I'd expect him to get minutes right away and probably be a starter by the end of the season. Early on, I'd expect him to provide a transition threat, and if the shot translates, some shooting. As he develops, I could see him attacking the defense more off the catch and off handoffs. Like Mark Williams, he's not the flashiest, but he could end up being a fixture of this Rockets team moving forward. With my last suggestion, I have Nikola Jovic from Mega. This is a dream of mine. In order for you to understand why, let me tell you a bit about Jovic. He's a reasonably decent shooter and can hit shots off the catch and off the bounce. He's also a really good passer and is able to make some exceptional reads. That's why his potential pairing with Alperen Şengün would be so tasty. Sure, they'd probably give up about 150 points per game, but who cares? I did leak it a bit there, but Jovic's defense is not good. He's seriously underdeveloped there, and he's gonna need to put in some work on that end. If he can at least be serviceable there, it can allow him to stay on the court long enough for his offensive gifts to shine. Well, ladies and gents, that's all for this video. I certainly hope you have enjoyed. If you have, please politely tap that like button. If you are new around here, tap that subscribe button as well. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, the comment section is wide open. And until next time, this has been your boy, Zachary McAllister. Have a good day.